we're going to talk about an interesting thing. One of the things I teach during the 4-day course is, we talk about how you can be healthier and live longer. And if we look at the people that have lived longest in the history of the planet, even now, the longest living people are Koreans, what is their secret? Well, the biggest secret is that all of the longest living people, without any exception, eat lacto-fermented foods on a daily basis. The Koreans eat kimchi and about 10 other things that are lacto-fermented. So lacto-fermentation, what I teach in the course is how you can make yourself a 3-month supply in about 15 minutes. How we do it, we take 2 $1 buckets that you buy from the supermarket. Then you go and buy yourself a red cabbage, a green cabbage, a red onion, a white onion, some spring onions, some parsley, 3 colours of capsicum, some carrots, some ginger and some garlic. Those are the ingredients. You run them through a food processor and you mix them together in one of your buckets. Then you take the handfuls from one bucket and put it into the second empty bucket and you make a layer so deep. And then you pour salt, about a tablespoon on that layer. Why salt? Because what you're going to create at the finish of this process, you're going to put a cork on the top, create anaerobic conditions, and lactobacillus are everywhere, this creature. They're in your gut, they're on the outside of your skin, they're on every soil, they're on every plant surface. You don't even have to add an inoculum when you make a fermented food. All you do is put salt on each layer because lactobacillus love salt and every other organism hates them. Now, you don't choose the industrial table salt. I mean, the very simple equation about nutrition and what keeps you living longer and healthier, it's so simple. You ate the food how God intended it. There's no food that we ever processed, ever, in the history of man that was even a shadow of what the original whole food was. Everything we touched, we messed up. You take wholemeal flour and converted it to white flour. 9 out of 10 loaves sold in this country, white flour. In Australia, 9 out of 10 loaves. And what you've removed to create wholemeal into white is 80% of everything of value in that food. And now you've created something, those 9 out of 10 children carrying those lunch boxes to work, you're sending them off to work with something the nutritionists tell us is an anti-nutrient. What's an anti-nutrient? Well, the most energy-intensive process in the body is digestion. And an anti-nutrient means that by the time you've digested and used all those nutrients to digest something with no value in it, you've had a net loss. It's not a good thing to demineralise the food and send kids off to eat it for breakfast, lunch and dinner, which many people do with their bread. But that's just a classic example. So the simple message is just eat whole foods and you're going to do a hell of a lot better. So a classic example of how we bastardised one of the greatest known foods, which is called salt. There were empires built on the number of salt mines you had. You were paid in salt. It's got all 74 minerals in the perfect balance. Sea salt or rock salt, which is what used to be sea salt a few million years earlier, contains everything in the perfect balance. And what did we do? We said, no, we don't want 72 of those. We'll just strip them out and leave sodium chloride. Oh, and it doesn't flow too good out of the salt shaker, so we'll add some aluminium as an anti-caking agent. Now I want you to Google, if you can remember, aluminium and Alzheimer's. Now we've got a plague disease that kills 1 in 4 of us over 65. Horrible disease. You can't even remember your own children's names. Not even worth living. The new work, a couple of years of studies now, on fluoride as basically the trigger for aluminium to do its dirty work. And then think about your morning routine. Hop out of the shower, dry yourself off, grab your underarm deodorant, and you do need to know one thing, there's only one substance known that can stop sweat, that goes into the sweat cell and shuts down the sweating production. It's called aluminium. You might have gone to a market and the hippie said, here's this little natural thing that'll stop your sweating, and you take this little crystal rock home and put water on, put it in your arms and you stop sweating. You say, my God, it was right. But have it analysed, it's natural aluminium sulfate. Only aluminium can stop you sweating. And to do it, you've got to go right inside the cell through the most absorbent part of your body and shut down the stuff that sweats under your arm. Of course, you've got anaerobic conditions. You're sweating, bugs are coming in there, anaerobic bugs, and make the same smells they do in the soil, and that's why you want to shut down your sweat, perhaps. But you can use, a deodorant, but we're talking about an antiperspirant, all based on very, very available forms of aluminium hydroxide and a variety of other things. So you take your underarm deodorant, and then you take your fluoridated toothpaste. You've got the recipe to be 1 in 4 over 65 but at least you won't remember how you got Alzheimer's. It's nasty, but it's true. 80%, 85% of the immune system's in the gut, learning from your gut organisms, and most people have knocked those gut organisms around considerably with antibiotics, with food-grade stabilisers. How does food sit there in that great big football field, a football stadium-sized warehouse we call a supermarket that's quite new? It's only been a few decades that we had those things. But how does cornflakes sit there for 2 years? I mean, you know, food lasts for a week, 10 days, unless we salt it or dry it or whatever. But how do these processed foods last for 2 years? Because you put 2.5% of a nice sounding word, a food grade stabiliser. But a food grade stabiliser is a chemical biocide that kills single celled organisms, and you've got a gut full of them. And why would you think it stops working when you put your spoonful of, or your children put their spoonful of cornflakes, or in your case, even worse, unfortunately, because it's a bit more than that. They're putting their spoonful of mealie, the porridge, the corn porridge, which is now covered in glyphosate in your country. So someone did ask this bloke, his name's Professor Teruo Higa, he said, why is lactobacillus everywhere? God wouldn't have put it there for nothing. Why is it in every soil, every plant, every surface? We know what it does in our gut, but what else does it do? And he discovered, oh my goodness, it does all sorts of stuff. There's actually one Bacillus plantarum actually breaks down and makes humus faster than any other known organism. They control disease, they deliver minerals into the plant, they change soil structure, they do all sorts of stuff we didn't know about, and they compost much more quickly than conventional aerobic organisms. I'm going to share with you a recipe how you can make it yourself, and you'll find out how that can be done shortly. So let's just talk about how you do it. Here's the ingredients, small production. You can upgrade this to whatever scale you like. You take a cup of rice, you take a litre jar of water. You shake the water for a few minutes until you've got a really white, milky coloured water, and then you take the rice out of there and cook it, or whatever you're going to do with it. And that water you then put with the lid mostly closed, but a little bit of CO2 can sneak out of it so that it can breathe still, so it's not quite screwed up to the top, and you put that in the pantry for 1 week. And at the end of that week, you've got a film of little granules sort of thing on the top and a yellowy syrup that's formed, because what the story is with these lactobacillus, they love rice. There's a whole range of lactobacillus and some yeast that live on the surface of rice, and that little bit of exudate, the white milk, has become their food, and you've got this yellow serum on the base, which is now your starter, and you add that to 10 litres of milk. So now you've got yourself a 20-litre bucket with 10 litres of milk and the 1 litre of the yellow serum in it, stir it together, put the lid on. You could have the lid so it's a little loose, so it's mostly anaerobic to create the whole system, or you could have a tube with a little bottle of water stuck onto the 20-litre bucket if you wanted to. And then you leave that for a week. I mean, how simple is this? This is a 5-minute process. And a week later you come out, there's curds on the top, and there's this whey material on the bottom filled with these lactobacillus and yeast. The curds are a wonderful probiotic. You feed it to livestock. You can do this in a 1,000-litre vat and make a huge amount. And so is the liquid a wonderful probiotic, but usually you keep the liquid and now you dilute that and spray that. You can put it on compost. The compost has to be anaerobic, like making silage almost, but wonderful compost you make with it. So easy, you don't turn it, you don't do anything, you just spray it down on the compost, put black plastic, make sure it's sealed, and it composts underneath with this stuff. These bugs going to work on it. It controls a whole range of disease. You can put it through irrigation, you can put it through centre pivot, you can foliar spray it for disease, you can drink it, you can feed it to your livestock as a probiotic. Pretty easy, simple thing. There it is. You'll have all these notes on your DVD.